On the table in the dark room lies a rolled-up sheet of paper, smelling of damp wood, lamp smoke, and ink vinegar. Next to it is a box with keys, with chalk writing on the lid, indicating to whom and when to give cloth, to whom grain in lieu of rent, and to whom a pair of oxen as collateral for the future harvest. The door of the cupboard where the letters are kept creaks quietly. Tied with string, stamped with wax, they look like family bones, each joined to the other by lines of debts, guarantees, and marriage promises. Intimacy here is not stolen kisses, but a date, a seal, and the signature of an adult hand. Not a knightly ballad, but a neat note in the margins. Who gives the dowry? Who provides the interest? Who is responsible for honor in case of a dispute? It is not romance that frightens, but arithmetic. If word gets out, the loans will dry up, and then it will not be feelings that collapse, but the roof over the house. Hello, viewers, and welcome back. Please write where you are watching from, and enjoy listening. Correspondence from a 15th century family in eastern England shows how the word love is embedded in economics and law. Letters between adults are exchanged between farms and the city, between the parish priest and the lawyer, between the mother who runs the household and relatives who are negotiating deferrals with creditors. Each envelope contains not a confession, but a bill. Marriage here means a contract. The dowry is formalized through guarantors. Land is transferred to trusted holders in order to survive war and court. And honor becomes a collateral formula that binds relatives to receipts. If we put everything together into one picture, we can see how easily a broken thread of rumor tightens the noose around an entire line. Shopkeepers stop trusting, lawyers demand prepayment, and family friends announce that they are temporarily unable to confirm their guarantees. They have their own risks. Thus, intimacy becomes accounting. The bed is discussed as a right to use property, and tenderness as an item on the list of obligations of the parties. In one of the letters, an adult housewife describes how she keeps the house while her husband is in town, who she gave linen to in the hospital, who she punished with bread and water, which keys she had to take from the servant who was too eager to get to the chest. This is not morality, it is accounting. On another page is a list of court costs for the past month. On the third is a reminder that the promised dowry for the marriage of an adult child must be transferred through an intermediary. Otherwise, the deal will fall through. Another bundle of letters reveals a risk. The adult daughter is drawn to the manager, a trusted person, but from a different social class. Rumors spread faster than seals, and creditors, hearing that the union may take place without the consent of the elders, begin to be cautious. For the market, this is a signal. If the family cannot control the process, then tomorrow it will not be able to meet its obligations. It is not love as a feeling that is frightening, but love as an event capable of changing the map of guarantees. There are no duels at dawn in this story, but there are gray offices where adult clerks leaf through documents. When a dowry is not a decoration, but the body of a house, it is protected not by songs, but by formulas. The marriage agreement goes to the ecclesiastical court, where they check whether the adult parties were of their own free will, whether the exchange of words took place in front of witnesses, and how this fits in with previous promises about land and rent. In the absence of a printing press, the rustle of parchment is more frightening than a trumpet. A single entry changes the trust of an entire parish. Family honor in letters turns into an economic coefficient. It is used to grant deferrals, to plug holes in the budget, and it can be lost with a single piece of gossip. Thus, the private becomes public. The romantic choices of adults affect the jugs pledged as collateral and the haystacks standing in the drought. The myth tells of courtly love and secret meetings. The document responds with lines of expenses for lawyers, lists of witnesses, and neat handwriting about who agreed to act as a guarantor and who got tired of the risks and backed out. There is no rhetoric for rhetoric's sake in the letters. There is cold concern for the living. There are mentions of trips to seek advice from city practitioners, complaints about highway robbery, requests to relatives to send fabric and money under seal in order to make it to the next hearing. And there is a quiet threat that everyone understands without words. If rumors of disorder reach influential neighbors, those who dream of foreign lands will submit a petition and receive support, not out of romanticism, but out of calculation. The first prepared twist begins to emerge here. Honor and reputation cease to be words and become letters in debt receipts. When an adult manager is suspected of having too much influence over the house, it is not domestic jealousy, but a possible loss of control over the chain of payments. What matters to the court is not what is said in the kitchen, but what can be confirmed by witnesses and seals. The second twist looms in letters from the city. Shopkeepers, hearing about the family turmoil, begin to cut credit, not out of spite, but because they fear non-payment. In these lines, love looks like a risk that can only be insured with new signatures. The third twist is in the papers themselves. The more explanations the family has to write, the thicker their file gets, and the easier it is for an outsider in the market to refer to long-running cases to lower the price of honor. There is no naturalism here, no exemplary punishments. There are adults, long and wearily dragging their home through a season of disputes. There is a letter in which the mistress lists the prices of grain and fabric and asks not to forget the key from the storekeeper. There is a note in which the lawyer reminds about the deadlines, not for the sake of a clever phrase, but because being late means losing without the possibility of appeal. And there is a grim knowledge that flows through all the correspondence. The family's intimate life becomes public bedsheets in the city court, because marriage is about rights, land is about taxes, and reputation is about access to money, without which no love can survive between autumn and sowing. Further on, we will see how rumors turn into bets, how adult relatives try to hold the line by rewriting the terms of marriage in the language of the charter, and how quiet accounting replaces chivalrous honor in the public square. This is the disturbing truth of correspondence. The most personal decisions change the movement of jugs, chests, and seals. The myth promises a song. The document brings a bill. And this bill is always written in ink that does not dry in a day. In the fall, the correspondence thickens like smoke over drying rooms, and it becomes clear that the marriage line is not a wreath on the door, but a route for money, people, and seals. The adult daughter is referred to gently in the letters, through the house and the dowry. Her union is chosen not according to ballads, but by comparing rents, debts, and future claims. The names of guarantors are attached to the rent, and to the claim, the risk of a large neighbor who is just waiting for someone else's misstep to start redrawing the borders. While the shops in Norwich are closing their shutters, and the road to London is bogged down in mud, the Paston's chests are rustling with obligations, some in stamps pledged against the future harvest, some in the form of fabrics obtained from merchants on credit, and some in promises from adult cousins if they can keep their people from saying too much at the market. In this web, marriage is the main knot. If it is tied tightly, the house will survive any winter. If it breaks, wolves of judgment and rats of rumor will creep into the cracks. The letters breathe the craft of law. The marriage agreement is laid out in formulas. The consent of the adult parties, a clause about the dowry, the testimony of witnesses, a link to the ecclesiastical court in case of dispute, the protection of land through feudal lords on trust, so that an external blow does not destroy property like a stray dog destroys a bowl. In the margins, they note in small print who should appear and when, whose name to put down as a guarantor, how much money to leave in the city for expenses if the hearing drags on. Next comes a series of practical fears. Illness in the house could prevent someone from appearing, block the road to the chancellor, and deprive the family of the opportunity to present the paper and witnesses. In that case, the document is reinforced in advance. Guarantors sign not out of love for novels, but out of respect for a reputation that still holds value. The most dangerous thing is the human factor, which in myths is called the heart, and in correspondence, risk. In houses of this level, there are always adults whose hands hold the keys, chests, and rent collection. Their trust is the backbone of the family. When such a pillar is involved in a marriage that is not according to the book of births, business friends begin to count on their fingers. What will happen to the keys, seals, and deadlines? In the Paston Letters, such anxiety develops from sparse notes to dense paragraphs. Relatives write to each other about the repayment of debts, about the possible untimely attachment of an adult woman to a man of lower rank, about how to keep donors in favor without breaking the knot, where canon recognizes the power of mutual consent. Everyone understands aloud. Church law equalizes adults before vows, but the market equalizes no one. If the family cannot keep up, the shopkeeper in London will raise the price of credit, and the local judge will pay closer attention to the lawsuit of a wealthy neighbor. The seasonal cycle intervenes roughly. Fever in the settlements, damp cold that eats away at wounds under shirts, the burnt smell in shops where ink is heated to keep it from freezing. All this is described in bundles of letters without embellishment. The road to London is not a line on a map, but a series of overnight stays in strangers' homes, where the word of the headman can be worth no less than a piece of bread. There, adult messengers pass packages from hand to hand, cover the bundles from the rain at night, and bargain with the ferrymen during the day. One delay, and the consistory meeting is postponed for a month. In a month, a new story about disorder emerges. For this story, the shopkeeper asks for additional collateral. And in the village, two adult men decide that they can delay paying their dues. The owners are busy with women's affairs anyway. Thus, romance turns into a hole in the chest. Against this backdrop, marriage really does seem like a dangerous undertaking. The letters reveal a cold boldness. If the adults whose names are on the seals agree to recognize the union, the dowry can be passed through the feoffees, leaving the bride with the right to future maintenance and the house with the right to manage it. If not, the house will be left with a void in its heart and a hole in its accounts. The mother, who runs the household, writes about keys and expenses. The adults in the yard record how many days they stood guard at the gate and why they had to spend more on salt and vinegar. Lawyers calculate claims if they have to prove the validity of the consent in a church court. All these lines convey the same idea. The love of an adult does not go beyond the limits of the law. It lives within them. And if the thread is broken at this moment, not only the two will lose, but the whole line will lose. Then the difficult part begins. The reputation of the family, already burdened with obligations of inheritance and shares in someone else's will, becomes the object of pursuit by influential people. The neighbor has a long memory for other people's conflicts, while the merchant has a short but accurate memory for dates of non-payment. The Pastons are forced to send explanations to the city. Who swore, how they swore, before whom, and how the consent of the adults is reflected on paper. These explanations take their place in the same chests where everything else is kept: leases, wills, guarantees. The house turns into an archive of its own vulnerability. Anyone who gains access to the retelling can say that things are not going well in this house, and that will be enough to tighten the credit. So the rumor touches the bank wall, and from that touch, a whole row of jugs cracks. At some point, the human knot that everyone turned away from becomes legal. The adult parties whose names appear in the letters show their will. From a church point of view, this is enough for the union to be valid. Family logic objects, because behind each name there is a line of expenses, and behind each line there is a stranger's hand holding the brand of the house on the ground. Two truths lie on the table: canon and economy. In the letters, it sounds like a clash. One thread pulls toward unconditional recognition, the other toward maintaining control. A century of experience teaches us that to break one of the threads is to leave the house without breath. Then, the contracts are rewritten, removing anything that might look like a challenge to the market, leaving only what is necessary and sufficient. The personal honor of adults is recognized at the level of ritual. The economic honor of the house is secured through feoffees and keys. But the market does not remain silent. London connections, which for years provided fabric on credit, demand a public sign of stability. In response, miniature victories come from the courtyards. No one sold their silver for the holiday. They did not pawn their entire supply of flax for the winter. They did not skimp on the hospital. These small lines work better than shouting. Through them, it becomes clear that the house is not slipping away, that adults, despite their personal decisions, continue to keep the household going. Then, the first prepared turn, the transformation of honor into a line in a receipt, is continued. People understand that honor is measured not by words in the square, but by the number of weeks in which the house has not missed a payment. In correspondence, this effect is dry but tangible. The shopkeeper politely leaves the previous deadline. The village headman stops delaying the tithe. And in the city, a new meeting is scheduled, not in 6 months, but in one season. On the other hand, rumors are circulating, sold as entertainment. Their authors paint a hot story in their imagination, because such a story sells better than labor and cold weather. But the letters are placed next to notebooks of expenses for lawyers and records of how much each trip cost, the recalculation of boundaries, and the summoning of witnesses. There is no place for spectacle in this arithmetic. There is fear of missing the deadline and losing the right, because there was not enough money for the trip, or because the headman at the crossing detained the messenger because of someone else's quarrel. In this world, someone else's passion is not a moral transgression, but a financial transaction with consequences. Either it is accepted and incorporated into the document, or it results in a long-term crisis of confidence. The third prepared twist, thickening the dossier to such an extent that it could crush the house with its weight, is partly neutralized by the fact that the sheets begin to stack up in favor of the family. In any turmoil, she pays for bread, keeps the keys with her, and does not let the property fall apart. The darkest thing about this picture is its normality. Paston's letters show not a unique scandal, but a routine where every step an adult takes is reflected in the law and the household. In such conditions, intimacy is the order of access to the chest, the order of signatures, the discipline of silence. The family knows that if a secret is spread around the market, tomorrow a neighbor will show up at the door with a prepared petition and a friendly smile. Therefore, letters teach not the economy of feelings, but of words. The fewer words that go out, the more likely it is that the court will hear the papers rather than the noise. And it is the papers, not the song, that rewrite the fate of the marriage. They give it a status without nicknames, a price without humiliation, a place in the table of contents where rent, tribute, inheritance, and the education of the younger children stand side by side. By the end of this part, it is clear that the house, having survived the first storm, has chosen a strategy for survival. Instead of demonstrative reconciliations, there are quiet agreements on order. Instead of signs on the gates, there are correct entries in the books, where the rights of adults are stipulated and the interests of the family are protected. Instead of public purges, closed disciplinary measures involving chests and keys. Love does not disappear. It turns into an article to which the word fulfilled is added. The myth is devalued not because the feeling is a lie, but because the household requires form. The document provides this form, and from it, like a tight bandage, blood flows into the house, slowly but steadily. There will be more trials. More people will rise up who are fond of the fair. But if the bundles of letters continue to be stacked into this boring, rigid mathematics, the house will survive. And in the 15th century, that meant more than any romance. The roof does not fall from someone else's story when its beam is made of law. In winter, convoys are delayed at the crossing, and rumors of domestic unrest flash across the market again. The papers respond with what they know how to do. They double-check the receipts in the chests, make new notes about witnesses in the margins, and add another adult to the previous feudal lords, so that the castle on the ground does not rest on the trust of one shoulder. The cold weather reveals weaknesses that are forgotten in the summer. A broken peg on the boundary line, a missing sheet in a bundle of debt acknowledgments, an unpaid bill for a lawyer's services, missed rent payment deadlines. In letters, this sounds like a quiet alarm. Don't let strangers slip through the cracks between deeds. Where myth loves drama, documents love consolidation. A register of debt obligations is added to the marriage contract, where the names of adults are accompanied not by loud vows, but by cold collateral. Each new entry protects not feelings, but the family's ability to live to see the spring road. The pressure of reputation strikes precisely. In an urban environment, the word disorder sells easily, under which any economic misstep can be hidden. Hearing about the noise, the shopkeeper suddenly remembers the overdue payment he had previously tolerated and demands immediate payment of at least part of it. In response, a sober bundle of letters leaves the house. A list of payments made, the names of witnesses, a note about the postponement of the meeting due to the illness of adult participants, agreement on a new date for the hearing, and the guarantee of cousins, confirmed with seals. This is not rhetoric. It is the surgery of trust. With each such package, the house regains another day of peace. The merchant, having received a sign of life in the form of a neat line, puts down his knife. The neighbor, who was itching to file a lawsuit over the border, quietens down. He does not have the luxury of waiting forever, and the paper squeaks not loudly, but persistently. Against the backdrop of economic hardship, another line emerges in the correspondence: the struggle against spectacle. The market loves stories about the alleged audacity of adult women who go beyond expectations. These stories are believed not because they are true, but because they are convenient as a tool for putting pressure on the wallet. The family's response is formulated dryly. In the church sphere, the will of adults is recognized. In the economic sphere, the house is insured through fioffiv. In the social sphere, access to gossip about chests and keys is closed. The marital combination fits into an algorithm where intimacy is a right of use and feelings are an article of the act. Where the crowd awaits the pillory, the letters contain a reservation about closed disciplinary measures. Not a procession, but a temporary removal of keys. Not a stigma, but a record. Not a signal to the crowd, but a record for the court. As a result, the market is deprived of spectacle, and the home is deprived of the danger of becoming entertainment. The legal landscape is also changing. City offices are increasingly insisting on written forms. A single verbal agreement in front of witnesses is no longer enough. Repeated confirmations are required. In correspondence, this is evident in the doubling of safeguards. A separate memorandum on the dowry is added to the marriage contract, to which is added a small note on the inadmissibility of removing items from chests without the presence of adults, and to this note are added the names of those who have the right to open the barn in the absence of the owners. The household turns into a mechanism where each wheel is fixed with a paper pin. This annoys lovers of simplicity, but keeps the house upright. People on the streets say that the family is hiding behind paper. In response, they take the hospital's expense book out of the chest. The linen, vinegar, and water that have been issued speak louder than fiction. At the same time, there is a line of obligations to the people who work shoulder to shoulder. Keeping adult workers close means maintaining reputation. The letters contain boring but vitally important things. Adjustments to rations so that no one goes hungry during the lean week. A note about replacing shoes so as not to lose hands in the mud. A note that gate rotations have reduced nighttime fights. A note that for talking in the market with the keykeeper, access to the chest is revoked for exactly the period specified in the house. None of this sells like a novel, but it establishes the strength of the line. A person who knows that tomorrow he will have work and bread is less likely to take sides in a street dispute. And this is precisely what restrains the political ambitions of outsiders. It is pointless to storm a house where internal discipline is laid down in writing. In one of the winter months, a particularly sour voice of the city breaks through in the correspondence. Reconciliation in the square is proposed with a public form of appeasement, implying a theatrical procedure for the sake of general calm. This is met with an icy response in every sense. A list of donations for the year, a list of people whom the house did not abandon in the hospital, a calculation of how much one crowd surge in the square costs compared to roof repairs, a caveat that public rituals drive up the price of credit, while closed measures do the opposite. The bill is written not for beauty, but for survival. Markets have short memories, books have long ones. Anyone who has ever stood in line to see a lawyer knows this. The sharpest corners remain in the intimate part, which is now completely legal. The adult woman, for whom the whole knot is tied, turns out to be not an object of upbringing, but a subject of law. In the church, her word of consent is equal to that of her partner. In the economic sphere, her movements affect the location of chests and keys. In the family sphere, her choice changes the routes of loans. In letters, this is formalized without pathos. The content is agreed upon, the right to property is secured, and mutual obligations are tied together with a cord. When opponents try to turn her into part of the problem, the documents return her to the center as part of the solution. This is not a romantic victory. It is the salvation of the home from division. As a result, the myth that family honor belongs to the crowd is shattered. The home is convinced that honor is the work of serving obligations and silence behind closed doors, not the applause of strangers. A dull pain also appears in the correspondence. The court season exhausts the adults. The ink smells like incense to the weary. The roads take away the skin on people's heels and the time of children, who are not described because the story is about adults, but are implied as another expense item by the fire. Sometimes letters arrive late, and then the office coldly postpones the hearing. Sometimes a witness is intercepted and persuaded at length to remain silent for the sake of common peace. Sometimes fatigue causes mistakes in the formula, and the letter has to be rewritten. Each such case is a risk. To endure this, the house learns to breathe like a workshop, evenly and without inhaling for the public. Where they used to rely on eloquent speech, they now rely on tactile truth, a seal, a key, a rope. However, fears do not completely dissipate. One month, news comes from the north of a new claim to a piece of land that was considered securely fenced off. Behind it looms a familiar motif. Rumors of disorder make ownership vulnerable. The family deploys its old arsenal. It confirms the boundaries in writing, calls witnesses from long ago inspections, checks parish records, and files old deeds. A floor of parchment forms on the table, dry, ringing like ice. The opponent, who dreamed of quick gains, is forced to either hire expensive people or resort to intrigue. And here again, The same boredom helps. When the list of expenses exceeds the likely profit from a piece of land, even those who enjoy exploiting others' weaknesses cool off. This economy is taught not by morality, but by ink. Meanwhile, work continues in the house, work that does not make it into legends. They write about solo purchases in case of road drifts, about vinegar supplies for the hospital, about dam repairs at the expense of rents, about the distribution of wool between courtyards. Within this viscous everyday life, the part devoted to marriage ceases to stick out like a sore thumb. It becomes one of the articles, important but not all-consuming. In this sense, intimacy as family accounting takes its final form. It no longer requires space in rumors because it has taken its place on the shelf in the chest. Next to it lie the things on which winter survival depends. This means that the feeling is built into the survival machine, not into the heat of someone else's fantasy. And yet, the cycle requires a denouement. Too much trust has been invested to pull this thread endlessly. Both camps, which have been breathing on the glass in turn, already understand the price of fatigue. The political will in the city is leaning towards an agreement for the sake of peace. The family, trained to write, formulates conditions for itself. Recognition of the reality of the union of adults, fixation of the order of the dowry, confirmation of rights to key items and land through feofives, restructuring of the payment schedule so as not to fall into a hole in the spring. Opponents who dreamed of a spectacle insist on a sign for the crowd. Instead of a sign, the house offers a number written in words, term, amount, receipt, seal. The crowd yawns, but the court listens. This is the corridor through which they emerge from the cramped quarters to a decision. There are still the last bursts of rumors and the last attempts to turn fatigue into political capital to get through. But the backbone has already been rebuilt. A year of paperwork has given the world new muscle. Next will come what the letter exists for, a compromise that is not like a song, but allows one to live to see the end of the suffering. It will be dirty, rough, without delight, but it will be possible to come out of it with one's head and home intact. The final slab to which this corridor leads is not about duels or glory. It is about how grown-ups, weighing a key and a pen in their hands, managed to ensure that love did not tear the chests apart, but entered them, as befits anything for which they want to live another spring. In the spring, the arbitration corridor becomes a reality. The city office offers to tie the church plane and the economic plane into one knot, so as not to lose people and grain in the new seasons of rumors. The house agrees not out of love for peace, but out of fear of an empty chest. The project is laid out on parchment, and each block has its own adult carrier. The will of the parties is enshrined in church form. The dowry is transferred through trusted holders, with a proviso of inviolability of some of the items. Keys and access to the barn are distributed by name so that no single pair of hands has complete control. The payment schedule is split into terms, with space for a witness's mark at each term. These dry lines contain the essence of the intimate world: the right of use, the right to maintenance, the right to silence. Those who came for the spectacle are offered a number written in words and a seal instead of space. Those who traded in shame are left with only whispers in the marketplace, but whispers do not pay lawyers. The margins of the pages, where decorations usually reside, are now filled with precautions: temporary removal of keys, the obligation to notify of each issuance of fabric, the obligation to return items if the order is violated. The gloom of this world is that it only works at arm's length and tolerates the weaknesses of others as a fact of biology, not a reason for fire. On the day when the bags are changed, the house celebrates not a celebration, but a sigh of relief. The sick are in place, the stoves are burning, the horses are intact, the witnesses are alive, The road is passable. Opponents who expected high tension are confronted with the sticky matter of procedures, where every move costs so much that it is cheaper to lower your shoulders. The myth still tries to foist the idea of public cleansing on the cities, but the office, accustomed to counting every last lamp, responds with a bundle of hospital expenses and a list of donations, and the square runs out of arguments. The power of the decision lies in its meagerness. Compromise does not flatter people, but it keeps a roof over the heads of those who depend on them. A new rhythm appears in the letters. Instead of agitated paragraphs about rumors, there are monosyllabic messages about completed items. Instead of long explanations, there are short notes about confirmations received. This tone makes it clear that the house has chosen not righteousness, but longevity, not glamour, but solvency. And the long-awaited silence that comes after the exchange of seals is like an empty hall after a fair. No applause, no booze, but the floor is clean, and bread can be carried to the pantry across the clean floor. After a few weeks, the loan stops shaking. The shops are once again ready to release fabric on credit on the previous terms. The villages stop delaying their tithes, and the city makes it clear that the boundaries, confirmed by witnesses and an old copy of the parish register, are recognized as sufficient for peace of mind. Inside the house, a quiet redistribution of power takes place, which was the invisible goal of all the difficult correspondence. An adult woman, around whose fate other people's calculations revolved, receives formal maintenance, the right to sign parts of the household inventory, and a fixed order of access to things. This is not a romantic crown, but a set of keys on a ring. Intimacy becomes not a secret, but a section in a book, next to which are words about flax, water, vinegar, and salt. By the end of the road, the myth loses ground. Where it promised jewels and cleansing fires, there lies a legal clause on the inadmissibility of public rituals, and an instruction to resolve internal failures with closed disciplinary measures. The document wins not because it is more beautiful, but because it survives the winter. The correspondence dissolves into routine. There are reports on the repair of dams, the replacement of shoes at the gate, the change of courtyard rotations, hospital beds for the elderly, and the purchase of candles for long services. Over time, all participants in this story understand the simple science of the 15th century. The love decisions of adults become lasting only when they are stretched through law and accounting. And if this science has a price, it is paid not with applause, but with deadly boring lines that save the living. The ending is not brilliant, but it is clear. The house remains a house. Silence is more precious than glory. Honor is measured by fulfilled obligations, not loud oaths. The letters are closed, the chests are in place, the keys hang where they should hang, and spring comes as proof that life can be sustained without space.